after I bought my GTR, my interest in JDM cars really peaked. Wrote an article on my blog about Duncan Motors, and when I was at Duncan Motors, they had a bunch of stuff I had never even seen, known about, heard about, and this Alto Works RS-R, while it's not from them, is a car that I became really interested in. It's in that K-car segment. It's 660cc motor, plus turbo, plus all-wheel drive. I'm interested. The K-car segment in general is kind of fascinating to me. You know, as a car guy, I always knew about, like, you know, the 2-liter rule, or different rules that governments, world bodies had set as far as higher taxation on things over 2 liters, and thus, you know, Ferrari makes a 2-liter 308, those sorts of things. But the K-car segment really came about as Japan needing a small city cars that performed well in the city. But the great thing about the segment is they didn't want to delete the fun. In this car, in all of the cars, like the Beat, the Cappuccino, the AZ1, this car, all of the, well, even the Honda trucks, those mini trucks, even those have kind of an air of whimsy. The Nissan Figaro, those cars, there's a lot of thought went into all those cars. Heck, on the Beat, that car was originally penned by Pininfarina. With regards to this car, everywhere you look is interesting. This detail right here is one of my favorites, this little air intake. Probably not even usable or functional. Maybe it is. I haven't looked at it, but you know, but very cool. The functional hood scoop directs air right to the intercooler. You know, it's stuff like that that's really cool, and it doesn't just end there. It goes the whole way around the car with the bodywork. Interesting labels everywhere, including on the steering wheel itself. This wing, that wing, it's just a fascinating little car. And one thing that I'll say, and that I always love about hot hatches in general, and this is like the tiniest hot hatch you could imagine. It's significantly smaller than like a Mark 1 GTI. Are these vented rear windows? I mean, I remember fiending for those on my Mark 2. And honestly, after buying the GTR and falling absolutely in love with it, and then not being able to find a clean Mark II Volkswagen, that's really what led me to buy my Beat. That's what led me to be really interested in this car, because you have a hot hatch chassis, a hot hatch design, and it's a party at 10 miles an hour. You can't say that about many other cars. This car at 10 miles an hour is, you know, there's diverter valve noise, there's pops out the exhaust. You can get it sideways at like 15 miles an hour. What a party. And then continuing around to the fact that, like, yeah, it's right-hand drive, amazing door handle fun, and I'm a pretty big guy. I'm 6'2" and a slightly over 230 pounds, let's be honest. I fit pretty well in this car. I don't have as much room as I do in the Beat. The Beat is a really, really well-designed interior. It's a lot bigger than it looks, but I do fit a ton better in here than I do in the AutoZam. And the driving position in this car is actually great. Great steering control, great pedal placement, and the seat is firm and supportive, even for someone who's got a 36 waist like me. So check it out. K-cars were made not for export, but for use in the JDM, the Japanese domestic market. And there's just quirks about them that are completely like anime, manga level cool. And I think that it's part of the draw for me is that this car doesn't feel like it was designed for someone like me. It's got plenty of room. You can actually fit 4 people in this car. It's not quite as voluminous as one of my original Minis. Those cars are unbelievably well designed and probably even a little bit smaller than this overall. But the Japanese quirkiness is just something, is really something to sample. I came up on the German Teutonic coolness. This has kind of transitioned for me, and now all of a sudden I'm a Godzilla loving freak boy. This car in particular really piques my interest. I love the period ARE wheels, and at 195, 45, 14, that's a pretty big meat on this little car. Let's look under the hood. So under here, Details abound for the enthusiast. Fun, fascinating car guy details abound. I love the cutout in the hood for the headlights. This thing looks cool. Like, you could buy one of these hoods, mount it on your wall. You don't need any more art. That thing's doing it for you. Under here, the fun size marine battery cracks me up every time I look at it. And if you're familiar with like even motorcycles, I mean, honestly, this engine is like motorcycle size. Look at the size of this intake. Look at that. It's so tiny. It's so little. If you're looking to import one of these cars, now that they're over 25 years old, I'll be honest with you, you should do it yourself. I've imported a lot of different cars from Europe and from Japan, and it's not really that hard. There's tons of information online on how to do it. You can bring it in, pay the fees, get everything done. I think you should go to the port and get the car yourself. Any of the damage I've ever had on a car has happened at the port, so go and get your car yourself. Also, you want to see a VIN tag like this, and just kind of make sure that all the information on the VIN tag matches what you think you're buying. These RS-Rs are extremely rare. Make sure that you're actually getting a true works RS-R. We spent a good amount of time getting the shots for this car today, and I have to tell you, like my beat, I drove it 400 miles on the highway at like 5,200 RPMs the entire way. So these cars, while they are high strung, are built for it. This car, we spent quite a bit of time, I wouldn't say beating on it, but flogging it, hitting red line, you know, in boost most of the time. Even the tiny radiator kept it cool, never had any detonation or any weirdness like that, and so it is a car that will perform. It does have actual performance. I know a lot of times people, you know, think about the Cappuccino or the AZ1 or the Alto Works, and they think, you know, it's just a fun, you know, little Saturday car. I mean, honestly, depending on what you know, where you live and how you use your cars, this is a performance car. I'll say it feels a lot different than the other, like the normally aspirated cars, in that it has a ton of torque. I mean, you don't have to rev this thing out to 9,000 RPMs. It's cool, but it doesn't sound as good as the Honda engine screaming away with its independent throttle bodies at 9,000 RPMs. This car at 3,000 RPMs, you're in boost, you're feeling that torque. And I mean, I'm happy to plug this thing away, shifting at 4,500, 5,000 RPMs. It still feels boosty and is pretty enjoyable. The all-wheel drive system too is pretty transparent. It just always goes. You hit second gear, there's no chirping. Even around corners, the traction is always there. From a perspective of like a Sunny GTI-R or like a Pulsar Type R, I mean, it's like roughly as quick as like a 16 valve Volkswagen, maybe a little bit slower than that. I mean, it feels quicker, but you know, talk a very small short gear ratios, bursts of speed. But in terms of like keeping up with traffic and that sort of thing, more than capable of keeping up with traffic. This one I think might actually be running a little more boost than stock. As far as where it runs 60 on my phone timer, you know, you're looking in the 8.5 second range for 0 to 60 without total abuse. But you've got to think of the era, and also, I mean, that's a fun little car. Heck, you're in like top of fourth before you're even at that speed anyways. So pretty awesome. Now, while the K-car segment has a lot of whimsy and fun to it, I also like that they've got these blistered arches. It's kind of subtle, but look at these front and rear arches. Even this thing kind of looks like an era Renault Clio, like the Williams Clio, or, you know, it's just a very cool car. We didn't get anything quite like that in the States. It almost kind of echoes a Starion or Quattro type of vibe, and I mean, if you're Tim Neely, you can't have enough of that. One thing about JDM cars is the Japanese are fastidious about maintenance. Even though most of these cars are not galvanized, you will be hard pressed to find one that's a rusty POS. These cars are really well made if they're maintained, and in my experience, most of the ones that you're going to see have been well maintained. So 660 cc's in the Beat feels like 660 cc's. It does make, I feel like it probably does make about 70 horsepower. at 9,000 RPMs, but there is like no torque. This car, it has all sorts of torque from even low RPMs, which is like really a surprise considering the beat. Now many people consider like the AutoZam AZ1 and this car to be pinnacle of the K-car era, and this feels a lot different than, and in a lot of ways a little more raw than a AZ1. I also fit in this, I mean there's a lot of space in here. There's two big dudes are in this car right now, so yeah, I mean it's a surprising amount of room, although that's relative. Let's call that a relative term. I'm convinced the Suzuki RS-R is the king of the K-cars. Let there be no doubt. Blah blah car, blah blah blah, design language. Don't forget to visit timsenthusiastgarage.com, where I've got merchandise, blog posts, everything you want to get closer to the cars that I feature in the series. Also, check out Motorvice, a live Tim's Enthusiast Garage production that focuses on 80s and 90s vehicles, and go to motorviceshow.com to get tickets or to get this sick M1 poster.